Good morning, welcome, and we'll start off right with a bracha. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. And of course, if you tuned in yesterday and went through the session, you realize we are reading some challenging material in terms of our relationship to the Torah, the written Torah here, and having to really test our hearts and test our loyalties and things like that, at least in terms of our current and modern sensibilities. I'm going to go ahead and share. And it's especially got to do with a passage, right? In this verse 17 here, where Moses essentially tells the Israelites, those soldiers, etc., to kill off, they had killed off the men who had battled them, and now he's told to kill off the women, any of whom, and as the interpretation goes, this actually goes beyond the simple meaning of the Torah, any woman capable of sexual intercourse among the Midianites. And not only that, every male child. And so the only women that would survive this particular campaign would be the female children, the little girls. They were the only ones who would survive. And Golda had said that she was going to bring some material to look at an alternative interpretation. The only, if I don't even want to call it necessarily a justification, let's just call it a rationale, that this is the way everybody behaved. That had the Israelites lost, they would have been treated the same way. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I am here. I cannot find my copy of the Five Books of Miriam, which is a newer commentary. And yes, we are dealing with this as more historical. I think I lent it to my daughter, and it's in her room somewhere.
Okay.
But it would be a newer interpretation and a female interpretation. I think it's sensibilities, and we just have a problem with this, because we're talking about, women who are just women. I mean, they're just regular old women and scared to death. And I can't imagine what that even looked like. It was just, it could not have been a lovely scene. That's all I'm saying.
I'm sure.
I think I think the women in this group are seeing this more as oh my God, how could they do that to anybody, but much less girls who were maybe 10 years old, or
right. Or
I
younger,
think that's our problem, or even younger, because 3 years old was old enough to get married, apparently.
That is correct.
According
apparently
to
so.
some
I
of these
agree.
people.
Look,
so
again,
it's like, oh my God, it's very difficult for us.
It's difficult for me. Okay.
I hope so. Even killing the little boys is difficult. I mean,
all of them, by the way, none of them survived. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Right.
So okay. So the one approach that I've had is contextual. All right.
Right.
This, in other words, justice is basically quid pro quo. That's the way they would have treated the Israelites. And not only that, we can also assume that they would have killed off every single one. And by the way, when the Nazis killed the Jewish people,
right,
within living memory for many, or some at this point, right?
Right.
Just somewhat.
It didn't matter. I know.
It didn't matter at all. Women, children, babies, didn't matter. And the experimentation, the medical experiments.
Yep.
Okay. That makes this
genocide is genocide, unfortunately. Yes.
Well, no, I think there are degrees. I don't think we can afford to not look at it. It doesn't mean one's right and one's wrong. What it does mean is, are there degrees? And the degrees that the Nazis went to, which is within modernity and within living memory, went far beyond this.
Oh, and it's happening in Africa and other places too.
And similar. And there's also torture, by the way.
Right.
This
Absolutely.
did not include any torture at all. I'm not saying this, please, I hope no one misunderstands me. I'm not saying this to justify it. I'm saying it to try to understand it. That's
Right.
all. That's the only place I'm coming from. And I have to tell you, everyone deserves a vigorous defense. Okay. So,
Sure.
uh,
No, so this in the grand scheme of genocide is not as bad as
and
some
that,
could be.
and I'm
They're
glad.
not killing everybody.
Correct. I
They're
appreciate.
still letting some of that DNA get through.
Right.
So
Right. So I appreciate your saying that. It has a
Mhm.
more validity than if it came from me. Okay. But
No, I know it's not you, dear. I know it's Rashi. I
right.
have a problem with Rashi right
Well,
now,
it's
but
not
that's okay.
Rashi. Rashi's only sharing. He's not coming up with original thoughts except when he says "la'aniyat dati," which
Okay.
means in my poor opinion. Okay.
Okay.
He is quoting earlier sources. So there's
Right.
there's one more thing that I can think of that I want to add
I
to.
would have liked him to have said something like, in my poor opinion, this is not a great thing to do, but it would have been nice, but he didn't.
That wasn't his role. That wasn't what
No.
he was there to do. That might be in other commentaries, but that was not here. Let me say
Okay.
one other thing that I think is important and I hope helpful, and that is it is limited to this time and place. This is not, and I appreciate what Lisa said yesterday. People have used this to justify atrocities. But again, that's saying more about the person than it is about the Torah. And my sense is that when we come across these kinds of statements, they are extremely limited. So, for example, when it says to kill off all the Canaanites, right? There are no Canaanites around today. This is not something that somehow we try to extrapolate, right? It's limited to that time and place and circumstance, and that's the end of it. And there's plenty, of course, within Jewish tradition, um, some quite ancient, some a little more than 1,000 years old. Okay, within Jewish tradition, that recasts things that are stated in the Torah in one way and brings them in a sense up to date for the time and place where they're talking about. So we have a very strong tradition. So, for example, in Ashkenazic culture, a man does not marry more than one woman at a time, and that is over 1,000 years old. Okay, so and I think there's a sufficient support actually within the Torah itself to say this is a better way to go about doing things. All right, and I understand.
Also, the fact that we actually study the hard parts. Oh, sorry. I don't know
Right,
who's calling me.
right,
Oh,
right.
okay,
Well,
I gotta go.
okay. Okay. I'm sorry about that. I hope you can come back. All right. If it's okay with everyone, I'd like to keep going um, because I think you're going to find something interesting said about Moses getting angry. And we may make it today, we may not. But I'm hoping that at least by the end of the week, you'll have a chance to take a look at that. Okay. So we're looking at Hirgu, slaughter, right? Kill, I should say. And this is from the Sifrei. Lama chazar va'amar lahafsik ha'inyan. Okay, so why did it go ahead and repeat this? We already know that. Sorry, he is talking here about harogu. That's what he's talking about. So what's happening here is he's asking about why does it repeat it? So it says hirgu here, and here it says harogu, right? It repeats the idea of killing. Why? And that's what, right? There's no pointing here, and that's what confused me for the moment. Okay. So lama chazar va'amar. So why does the text go back and repeat this? Lahafsik ha'inyan. So according to one opinion, divrei Rabbi Rabbi Ishmael says to bring to an end the matter. In other words, to close this particular subject, or to understand this is it. And it's talking about kol isha yodat ishla mishkav zachar, that any woman capable of intercourse with a male, you should kill. Divrei Rabbi Ishmael. This is the opinion of Rabbi Ishmael. She'im ani kore hirgu kol zachar bataf. So you could remember the Torah, the scroll itself is written without any pointing. So he's saying if it had gone and said um, kill all male children. V'chol isha yodat ish, and then every woman who knows a man, literally, who knows a man or has known a man. V'chol hataf b'nashim, and all the it could have gone and said v'chol hataf b'nashim, okay, and all the female children, etc. And neodea, I would not know, I would not be sure, im laharog, okay. So this sometimes parentheses mean that there are words in a text that need to be omitted, okay. So interestingly enough, but it looks like here it needs to be included. Laharog v'chol isha yodat im hazcharim, whether any woman who was capable or who had experienced intercourse, okay, was to be killed im hazcharim, with the males, or lahachayot im hataf, or whether it means that they should live with the males, they should be spared with the males. Lachach ne'emar harogu. In other words, what it's saying is, okay, this phrase, kol isha yodat ish lemishkal zachar, if this word wasn't in there, v'chol hataf banashim, and all al-sher lo yadu mishkal zachar, and all the young women who were not capable of intercourse, right, with a male, you should survive, you should allow to live for yourselves, okay, elachem, for you. So this harogu comes to tell us that the women who were capable of intercourse needed to be killed. And that's why this word is in here. Otherwise, it would leave it as ambiguous as to what it was really referring to. So that's how Rabbi Ishmael, who, by the way, tends to interpret Torah on a more literary level, understands the purpose. Yes, Golda.
Okay, I had to unmute. Lachem.
Yes.
I've seen that when I was doing some source work on that.
Yes.
Rashi doesn't deal with lachem.
Right.
Right. For yourselves.
Yes.
Right. So are we keeping them as potential wives? Are we keeping them as slaves? What if that is not addressed, correct?
Correct. Right.
Correct.
And possibly because the halachic ramifications go beyond the scope of Rashi's interpretation. I would, this is me personally here, okay, means they're responsible for them, right? They could have just left them alive. So my understanding, not only that, we also have elsewhere a place, and we may have actually read this back in Mishpatim, that if as what is interesting, and not all of this is in Mishpatim, but it is interesting how a slave was to be, treated. Right. Right.
Yes, we did deal with that.
Right, and that she wasn't supposed to just be released and nothing happened. But they talk about if a man has designated this woman for his son or for himself, and if he, first of all, he cannot treat her with less as a less of a person than his other wives. Okay, that's of course in a time when polygamy was permissible. And under all circumstances, if he were to release her, he had to make sure she was taken care of. So what I would do here, of course, is say that's what this would imply here. That so again, I guess one other point we could mention, as long as we're sort of keeping on this subject, is killing a person. There's a difference, a world of difference between killing a person mercifully, which means speedily and with a minimum amount of pain, and if not without any pain at all, right? And torturing a person and extending their death, right? And making them suffer before they finally expire. There's an infinite world of difference. It's all
absolutely.
I'm not justifying, I'm simply clarifying. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing. Okay.
We don't talk about that either so much in this,
And
though.
that's understood. And that's
Yeah.
understood. Nowhere does it suggest that the execution should take place with suffering. And in general, where execution is discussed, it is done as instantaneously as possible.
Yes,
So,
nor torture. We have no views of torture in
right.
here
We
at
have
all.
there's nothing mentioned about it. There's
Right.
nothing about it. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Because if they were doing it, I think we would have known.
Right. Right. Right.
Okay.
Atem, and as for you, Chanu, encamp michutz lamachane, encamp outside the encampment, Shivat Yamim, for 7 days, Kol horeg nefesh, anyone who has killed a soul, Bechol nogea bechalal, not only that, but anyone who has come in contact with a corpse, Titchatu bayom hashlishi, you shall cleanse yourselves on the 3rd day, uvayom hashvi'i, and on the 7th day, atem ushvichem, you and your booty, okay, whatever you've captured. So that's an interesting statement, right? That they didn't just march back into camp, with their plunder. They had to, if they had killed someone, they had to now wait 7 days and go through a process of cleansing. And this, of course, is a halacha that we had mentioned back at the beginning of Chukat. So this is an application of that halacha. Let's take a look at the Rashi. Michutz lamachane, right outside the encampment. Shelo yikansu la'azara. And when it's talking about the machane here, the encampment, just to clarify, it means they should not enter the temple area. The azara refers to the area of the temple where the public was allowed to enter. But you had to be really, spiritually cleansed before you could enter this holy area. One of the ways in which to emphasize the holiness one had to have if one wants to approach God. Kol horeg nefesh, anyone who had killed a soul. And again, this is from the Sifrei. Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir says, Bahoreg b'davar hamakabel tuma hakatuv medaber. Rabbi Meir says that the scripture is referring here to one who had killed something or someone that was capable of becoming impure. So not everything is capable of becoming impure, right? I think there are basically 4 categories, if I can remember, okay? There's Adam, human beings, okay? There is kalim, there is vessels, types of vessels. I was just thinking of them, and now, of course, it's flipped through my memory. We know that animals are capable of giving tuma or becoming tameh, and there may be one other category that for some reason I'm not thinking. I don't have it in front of me, but not everything is capable of becoming tameh, becoming spiritually impure. The limidcha hakatuv, and Scripture is teaching us here, shehakli metame adam, that in fact a vessel, right, is capable of rendering a human being impure, the chibure hamet, when it is connected to a corpse. Okay, so what we're talking about here is that if a person took a sword and killed a person, that sword now transfers the impurity of the deceased person to the human being. Okay, so normally there are complicated rules with regards to how impurity gets transferred. But what we're learning here, what Rabbi Meir is teaching us here, is that if someone takes an object, right, and kills a person, they become impure, spiritually impure. Ke'ilu nogea b'met atzmo, as if he had touched the corpse himself. Or yachol, or does that mean? So does this mean afilu zarak bo chetz? Remember, it says anyone who's killed a soul. Remember, so does that include someone who threw an arrow, right? Who shot an arrow to that person, right? There's no direct physical contact, but he still killed someone, right? If he shot an arrow, v'hargo, and killed him, Talmud lomar, and for this reason, Scripture goes on to say, v'chol hanogea b'chalal. It goes on to say, anyone who touches a corpse. Makish horeg, so what it does is it connects one who kills the nogea to one who touches. Ma nogea al yedei chiburo, just as a person who touches, it's because he is in contact with that corpse. Af horeg, likewise, one in that understanding the context, right? Also one who kills al yedei chiburo. So therefore, someone who kills someone, it's but through the fact that they were in contact with that person. So you're getting a little taste here of Talmudic logic and Talmudic process, and using the rules of interpretation of how you derive laws and clarify laws in the Torah on a pragmatic level. So on a practical level, we know, right, it's there circumstances where if someone is killed through a sword, for example, or some other object, as opposed to being shot. Okay, so it's making that distinction. So as I said, you have here, Rashi's giving us a little taste of the way the Talmud goes about carefully pulling apart and really going into great detail regarding differences and subtle differences and maybe not so subtle differences, and how halacha is affected by those distinctions. Titchatu, right? You shall purify yourselves. B'mei nida. This is talking about the waters of lustration that we talked about, right? Back in Parshat Chukat. Kedin she'ar tum'ei metim. Just like any other people who have become impure through contact with the dead. She'af l'divrei ha'omrim. And again, we're continuing this little foray into Talmudic thinking here. She'af l'divrei ha'omrim, because even according to those who say, and he says where this comes from, Yevamot, page 61, Kivrei uvdei gilulim, he says even those who say that the graves of non-Jews, right, einan mitamim ba'ohel, do not cause impurity through a canopy, right? So I'm going to go over for a moment. We know that the impurity one derives from contact with the dead, from being in contact with a corpse, is an extremely high. In fact, it is the highest level of impurity capable, to such an extent that if one goes into a room, some place where there is a roof of some kind, right, over the corpse, and you go into that room, even if you are not in contact with that person, with the body, you become impure. That's the level. There's nothing else that can render you impure in such a circumstance. And this is called tumat ohel. Ohel means a tent, right? In other words, the canopy. Shene'emar. So these people who hold that only graves of Jewish people, of Israelites, in other words, are capable of such level of impurity. It's just this level. I mean, it's not other levels, but it's this particular level. And he goes on to say, those people who hold that position. So clearly there are those who don't hold that position and hold that any grave of a person, of any person, is capable of such a high level of impurity. And there are those who say, no, there's a distinction based on this verse in Ezekiel chapter 34. Va'eten tzoni tzon ma'iti, and I shall make my flock the flock of my pasture. Adam atem, you are Adam, you are Adam, or men, okay? Atem kruyim Adam, you are called, in other words, and he's talking here, the context of this verse is the Jewish people, the Israelites. You are called Adam, the ein of de gilulim kruyim Adam. And the people who hold this particular position mark that particular statement to mean specifically the people he's talking to, the Israelites, and idol, literally it means idol worshipers are not kruyim Adam, are not called human. All right, again, we are dealing with some very challenging material. Now look, is it talking specifically here? Okay, first of all, there are a bunch of different issues here that we have to deal with. One is it refers here as this is Ovdei Gilulim, mean idol worshipers. And of course, we haven't talked a lot about idol worship and its implications as to what it means as a human being and who we are as human beings. But let's be honest about it. There are many people who don't identify as Jews, who are not idol worshipers. And in fact, I know I don't have a lot of time right this moment, but I feel that what happened to the 10 northern tribes who were integrated into the Assyrian kingdom essentially mean that a lot of humanity, if not all of humanity now, has some kind of Israelite blood in them. This is my own humble opinion. But something happened to those people. They were not wiped out. We know for a fact that they were assimilated into that Assyrian empire. So basically, if we're talking about idol worshipers, we are talking about people who practice a certain way of living and who are not fulfilling their full potential as human beings. That's how I'd like to understand this. Let me see if I can get a little bit further, and then I'm afraid we're going to have to end today. But such people who make that distinction, and not every person, not every interpreter, Jewish interpreter, holds this, modeh, but they have to, even people who hold that opinion, have to acknowledge, right, who she'ha'oved gilulim, or ovdei gilulim, that idol worshippers mit'amim b'maga uv'masa, that nevertheless they are capable of transferring impurity through touch and through carrying. That is, if you carry on a litter, on a bed or something, a person who is a corpse, a body, a dead body, you become impure. Shelo ne'emar Adam, because this term Adam is only applied ela etzel tumat ohalim. It only refers to impurity that comes about through a canopy, through an ohel. How do we know this? Shene'emar, because it states in the book in Numbers, chapter 19, Adam ki yamut ba'ohel. Because when it talks about this particular halacha, it says Adam, an Adam who dies in a canopy. And I'm going to have to stop here, even though we couldn't get all of this done. And by the way, this particular Rashi here, I've started, has to do with Moses getting angry. Hopefully we can get to it tomorrow. So I'm going to put the little marking here. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments if you'd like to at this point. And I know I've been providing you with very challenging very challenging material. I know that. I'm going to stop the share here.
Yeah, I have a question
Yeah.
or statement anyway. Why didn't God punish the Israelite man? The Israelite man had wives. They could have said no to the Mennonites. No, we're not going to do fornication to you. We have wives, and our children would see what we were doing, and it would be wrong. Moses should have said, "What are you doing? You're doing wrong." And God
Harlan,
will punish you. But he didn't punish the Israelites. He punished the Mennonite women. I don't understand it.
Harlan, 24,000 Israelites died. They were the ones who were doing this. They're dead. They're not around. We read we didn't read it together here, but if you look at the end of Bil'am, you'll see that 24,000 Israelites died. They died immediately in a plague. So you can't say that God was showing favoritism.
Oh.
Those Israelites, the ones who you're referring to, were dead.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that's
they should have. I'm surprised the Israelite men did that. I'm surprised at that.
Harlan, you can't release it. We have this on recording, but I have to be honest with you. So you mean to tell me that nowadays people don't commit adultery or don't do silly, very regrettable things through human sexuality? Okay. Unfortunately,
You're right.
people do. We know about it. It goes on in countless situations every single moment because people they haven't trained themselves, and because the sexual drive is a very, very strong drive. And unless you prepare yourself by developing a way to control your impulses, there's a chance you're going to fall for it and you're going to get yourself into trouble. So you may be an exception, but pretty much all men, I'm not going to speak for women here, although I know that women will have to speak for themselves, but the impulse of sexuality is very, very strong, and there's a simple reason, because it's our way to procreate. And if we didn't have that, we would not procreate. But one has to learn how to understand it, understand the sexual drive, and to also recognize of how to behave in a way where you don't do what comes naturally in every situation.
I think that 10th commandment kind of dealt with that.
Yes, it did.
It's lust. I mean, it's wanting something else, but a lot of it has to do with lust.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we're doing what doesn't come naturally. There you go. That's what most of those 10 commandments are about.
Well, they wouldn't need to be. My argument is this: they wouldn't need to be commandments if people did them normally.
Right.
There is no commandment that says you need to breathe.
Oh, yeah, there is actually that first one in Noah. Not in Noah. Yeah.
No, it says God put the breath of life into human beings, not that they need to breathe. There's no
I
command
said breathe, not breed. I thought you meant.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I heard.
Yeah,
breathe.
no. T-H-E.
There you go.
I can totally understand.
Breathe.
Yes, exactly. Breathe. All right. We will leave it today.
I got one more question.
Okay.
When you're under a tent for a funeral,
Yes.
how do we purify ourselves when we leave?
We are not able to do it. We are not.
But we are supposed to wash our hands before we go into.
True. When we leave a cemetery, that's more.
We do wash our hands. We're supposed to. Anyway.
Right, Golda. That's more symbolic than practical. The fact of the matter is, we are all pretty much. But we know that, for example, if a rabbi is also a kohen, since a kohen is supposed to try and keep himself as pure as possible. I've actually seen it where the funeral home is set up in such a way that the rabbi can stand outside the room where the funeral is taking place, and they have a speaker system and stuff like that, so that the rabbi can perform the funeral without having to go into the room. Okay, but anytime you go into a hospital, because all hospitals have morgues, anytime you go into a hospital, you are rendering yourself impure. But it's okay. Impurity is is a complex thing, okay? And it isn't a black and white situation. We know, for example, that the group of people who are responsible for preparing the deceased for burial, for a Jewish person to wash the body and clothe it properly, etc., and who obviously now are becoming impure in this particular way, are known as the holy chevra, that they're the holy community. So,
my grandparents were part of Chevra Kadisha. Yep.
and we have, by the way, in Sonoma County, there is a wonderful one as well. I'm going to stop the recording right now.